Money can buy silence, but it can never buy class. When the soon-to-be wife of New York's most feared underworld figure publicly humiliated a terrified waitress over a spilled drop of champagne, the elite crowd held its breath, expecting the boss to finish the job. Instead, what Gabriel Moretti did next shattered the absolute foundation of his ruthless reputation, broke an engagement, and exposed a billion-dollar secret nobody saw coming. Listen closely, because power always has a blind spot. Gabriel Moretti did not look like a man who ordered executions before his morning espresso. Sitting in the dimly lit, velvet-draped VIP alcove of Cipriani downtown in Soho, he looked like a Wall Street titan. Dressed in a bespoke charcoal Brioni suit, his dark hair immaculately swept back, he possessed the quiet, terrifying stillness of an apex predator. At 34, Gabriel had taken the sprawling, chaotic syndicate his father had built and modernized it. He traded back-alley gambling rings for multi-million-dollar real estate extortion, high-frequency trading fraud, and controlling interests in the eastern seaboard's shipping ports. He was a phantom to the FBI and a god to the streets. But tonight, Gabriel wasn't dealing with federal indictments or rival cartels. He was dealing with something far more tedious: his fiancée, Victoria Harrington. Victoria was the crown jewel of the Harrington family, an old money dynasty that had built its fortune in the Gilded Age and spent the last century desperately trying not to lose it. Arthur Harrington, her father, was a hedge fund manager, heavily drowning in debt. Gabriel had bailed Arthur out to the tune of $80 million. In exchange, Gabriel gained access to the Harringtons' pristine financial networks, the perfect, untouchable laundromat for dirty money. The marriage was just ink on a contract, a strategic merger disguised as a society wedding. Victoria, however, had completely bought into the illusion of her own supremacy. She was a striking woman, tall and severe, with ice-blonde hair and features that looked like they had been carved from marble. But beneath the $15,000 Chanel haute couture dress and the 5-carat flawless diamond resting heavy on her left hand, there was an ugly, sprawling entitlement that Gabriel found increasingly repulsive. "The scallops are rubbery," Victoria announced, dropping her silver fork onto the porcelain plate with a sharp clatter that made the nearby busboy flinch. "I swear, Gabriel, ever since they got that Michelin star, this place has completely given up on actual service. It's crawling with tourists." Gabriel didn't look at her. He kept his dark eyes fixed on the stem of his wine glass, slowly turning it between his thumb and forefinger. "The food is fine, Victoria. Keep your voice down." "Don't tell me to keep my voice down," she hissed, leaning across the table, her blue eyes flashing with petulant rage. "We spend $20,000 a month at this establishment. I expect perfection. If I wanted mediocrity, I'd eat in Brooklyn." Gabriel took a slow, measured sip of his Barolo. He was exhausted. It was a bone-deep weariness that came from constantly managing monsters only to sit across from a woman who threw temper tantrums over seafood. He needed the Harrington banking connections for another 6 months to finalize the purchase of a commercial shipping fleet in Baltimore. After that, he planned to find a legal loophole to dissolve the marriage. But tonight, listening to her berate the ambient air 6 months felt like a lifetime. Around them, the restaurant hummed with the electric energy of Friday night in Manhattan. Celebrities, corrupt politicians, and tech billionaires filled the tables, their conversations a low roar of privilege. Yet a subtle, invisible perimeter of fear surrounded Table 4. The waitstaff knew exactly who Gabriel was. They knew that a wrong look, a forgotten drink, or a misplaced word could result in a career-ending or life-ending disaster. They moved around him like gazelles, navigating around a sleeping lion. Victoria waved her hand dismissively in the air, snapping her manicured fingers toward the floor manager. "We need a new bottle. This vintage is breathing terribly. And tell them to send someone who actually knows how to pour without breathing heavily over my shoulder." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "Stop snapping your fingers, Victoria. They are employees, not stray dogs." "They are paid to serve Gabriel," she replied, a cold, condescending smile playing on her lips. "If they wanted to be treated like equals, they shouldn't have chosen a life carrying plates. It's simply the natural order of things. You, of all people, should understand the hierarchy of power." Gabriel looked at her. Really looked at her. He saw the hollow cruelty in her eyes, the desperate need to step on others to elevate her own fragile status. In his world, violence was a tool. It was brutal, yes, but it had a purpose. It was business. But Victoria's cruelty was recreational. She enjoyed the subjugation of the helpless. It was a trait Gabriel, who had grown up in the gutters of Hell's Kitchen, fighting for scraps before his father built their empire, fundamentally despised. Power. Gabriel said, his voice dropping to a low, gravelly register that made the ambient noise around them seem to fade, "is knowing you can destroy someone and choosing not to. What you have isn't power, Victoria. It's just a trust fund and a loud voice." Victoria's face flushed a furious, ugly mottled pink, but before she could snap back, a young waitress cautiously approached the table, carrying a silver tray, bearing a freshly chilled bottle of 2012 Dom Perignon. The air was thick with the suffocating tension of an impending storm. Sarah Collins was running on exactly 3 hours of sleep, 2 cups of black coffee, and sheer, unfiltered panic. She was 22 years old, a nursing student at NYU, and working double shifts at Cipriani just to keep her mother in a specialized care facility in Queens. Her mother's medical bills were a relentless, crushing weight, and the tips at table 4 were legendary. The floor manager had specifically assigned Sarah to Gabriel Moretti's table because she was usually invisible, quiet, efficient, and unflappable. But tonight, Sarah's hands were shaking. She had been warned about the blonde woman. The entire kitchen staff was whispering about Victoria Harrington's foul mood. Taking a deep breath to steady her racing heart, Sarah approached the velvet booth. She kept her eyes respectfully lowered, presenting the green and gold bottle of champagne with a crisp white linen napkin draped over her left forearm. "The 2012 Dom Perignon as requested, ma'am," Sarah said, her voice soft but steady. Victoria didn't even look at her. She was too busy glaring daggers at Gabriel, her chest heaving with indignation from his previous comment. "Just pour it," Victoria snapped, waving her hand blindly in Sarah's direction. "And don't take all night." "Yes, ma'am." Sarah uncorked the bottle with a muted professional sigh of gas, avoiding the loud pop that was considered vulgar in fine dining. She stepped to Victoria's right side, leaning in carefully to pour the golden bubbling liquid into the crystal flute. It was a perfect pour. Or it would have been if the universe hadn't chosen that exact microsecond to intervene. At the adjacent table, an intoxicated tech executive violently pushed his chair back to stand up. The heavy wooden leg of his chair caught the edge of Sarah's sensible black shoe. It wasn't a hard hit, just enough to throw Sarah completely off balance. She stumbled forward, her wrist jerking involuntarily. A single devastating splash of champagne leaped from the lip of the bottle. It missed the glass entirely and landed squarely on the lapel of Victoria's pale silk Chanel dress. Time seemed to instantly fracture. For one agonizing second, Sarah could only stare at the dark, blooming stain on the pristine fabric. The restaurant noise faded into a hollow, echoing ringing in her ears. "Oh my God!" Sarah breathed, terror flooding her veins like ice water. She frantically reached for the linen napkin on her arm. "Ma'am, I am so incredibly sorry. Someone bumped into me. Let me help you." "Get your filthy hands off me!" Victoria shrieked. The scream was so sudden, so shrill and violently loud that the entire dining room fell silent. Forks hovered halfway to mouths. Conversations died in an instant. The soft jazz playing over the speakers suddenly felt deafening. Victoria shot up from her seat, her chair screeching harshly against the marble floor. She looked down at the dime-sized wet spot on her dress, her face contorting into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "Do you have any idea how much this dress costs?" Victoria screamed, stepping toward Sarah, who was shrinking back, trembling like a cornered rabbit. "This is custom couture, you clumsy, incompetent idiot. You make minimum wage. You couldn't afford the threads in this hem if you worked for the next 10 years. I am so sorry," Sarah stammered, tears springing to her eyes. "It was an accident, I swear. I'll pay for the dry cleaning, Dry cleaning." Victoria laughed, a harsh, hysterical sound. "You think you can just dry clean this? You stupid, useless little—" What happened next was so fast the security cameras barely caught it. Victoria raised her hand and struck Sarah across the face. The slap echoed through the vaulted ceilings of the restaurant like a gunshot. It was a vicious, full-force blow. The heavy diamond engagement ring on Victoria's finger caught the edge of Sarah's cheekbone, slicing the skin. Sarah gasped, stumbling backward and crashing into a serving cart. Silverware and glasses rained down around her in a cacophony of shattering crystal. She collapsed to the floor, her hand flying to her bleeding cheek. A hot tear slipped down her face, mixing with the sudden bright red streak of blood. The silence that followed was absolute, complete and suffocating. Every single eye in the room darted from the bleeding girl on the floor to the furious socialite, and finally, inevitably, to the Mafia boss sitting at the table. Gabriel Moretti had not moved. He hadn't flinched when the glass broke. He hadn't blinked when the slap echoed. He sat perfectly still in the shadows of the booth, his dark eyes locked onto Victoria. The maitre d' was paralyzed. The bodyguards standing by the entrance shifted their weight, their hands subtly hovering near their tailored jackets, waiting for the command. Everyone in the room expected Gabriel to order the girl dragged out, or worse, for ruining his fiancée's evening. He was a monster, after all. He was the man who allegedly sank a rival boss's yacht in the Hudson just to prove a point. The waitress was practically a ghost already. Victoria, breathing heavily, stood over Sarah, adjusting her diamond ring. She turned to Gabriel, expecting to see him beckon his men to remove the trash. "Gabriel!" Victoria commanded, her voice dripping with venom. "Tell your men to throw her out, and tell the manager I want her fired. Immediately." Gabriel finally moved. He slowly placed his linen napkin on the table. He stood up to his full 6'3" height, buttoning the center button of his jacket. The sheer physical presence of the man seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. He didn't look at Victoria. He walked past her, his expensive leather shoes crunching softly over the shattered glass on the floor. He stopped right in front of the terrified, bleeding waitress. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, pulling her knees to her chest, bracing herself for the final blow. She knew who he was. She knew she was dead. But the blow never came. Instead, Gabriel slowly crouched down until he was eye level with her. He reached into his breast pocket and withdrew a pristine, monogrammed silk handkerchief. With a gentleness that defied every rumor, every bloody legend whispered about him in the dark corners of the city, he reached out and softly pressed the silk against Sarah's bleeding cheek. "Hold this here," Gabriel said, his voice a low, soothing murmur meant only for her. "Don't cry. You have absolutely nothing to be sorry for." Sarah stared at him, her large, terrified brown eyes wide with disbelief. Her trembling fingers came up to press the silk handkerchief against the stinging cut on her cheek. The fabric smelled faintly of cedar and expensive cologne. She couldn't speak. Her throat was tight with a suffocating mix of fear and confusion. The most dangerous man in New York was kneeling in the spilled champagne, looking at her with an expression that bordered on apology. "Gabriel!" Victoria's voice cracked like a whip behind him. It was laced with confusion and rising hysteria. "What the hell are you doing? Get up!" Gabriel stood up slowly. He turned to face his fiancée, and the temperature in the room seemed to plummet 20 degrees. The gentle aura he had projected toward Sarah vanished, entirely replaced by a cold, predatory darkness that made the hair on the back of the maitre d's neck stand up. "Sit down, Victoria," Gabriel commanded. It wasn't a request. It was an executioner's gavel dropping. "I will not sit down," Victoria screeched, her carefully constructed high society facade completely crumbling into ugly, desperate rage. "This stupid bitch ruined my dress and you're helping her. Are you out of your mind? I am your fiancé." "You," Gabriel said, taking a slow, deliberate step toward her, "are an embarrassment." Victoria physically recoiled as if he had struck her. "Excuse me." "You heard me." Gabriel's voice remained at a low, deadly timbre, carrying easily through the dead, silent restaurant. "You are an embarrassment to yourself, to this room, and to me. You hit a young woman who is simply trying to do her job over a spilled drink caused by a drunk." He gestured slightly toward the tech executive, who suddenly looked like he was about to vomit from sheer terror. "You lack grace, you lack control, and you lack fundamental humanity." Victoria's jaw dropped. "Gabriel, my father, your father," Gabriel interrupted smoothly, "is a financial corpse who only breathes because I permit it. He owes me $80 million. The only reason this diamond," he pointed to the ring on her shaking hand, "is on your finger is because I bought your family's debt. Do not mistake a business transaction for devotion, Victoria." The brutality of the truth, spoken aloud in front of New York's wealthiest elite, hit Victoria harder than any physical blow. The blood drained completely from her flawless face, leaving her looking pale and hollow. The whispers in the room instantly flared up, buzzing like a hive of furious bees before hushing again to catch the next word. "Now," Gabriel said, his voice softening just a fraction, though the steel remained underneath. "You are going to look at this young woman, and you are going to apologize." "I," Victoria stammered, her eyes darting frantically around the room, taking in the hundreds of eyes pinned on her, judging her, absorbing the delicious scandal. "I will do no such thing. You cannot humiliate me like this." "I am not humiliating you, Victoria. You did that yourself when you raised your hand," Gabriel replied coldly. "Apologize, or the engagement is off, the debt is called in tomorrow morning, and your family's estate in the Hamptons is seized by my lawyers by noon. Choose." The silence stretched, agonizing and thick. Victoria looked at Gabriel, searching his dark, impenetrable eyes for any sign of a bluff. There was none. He would ruin her. He would tear down her family's century-old legacy without losing a second of sleep. Her shoulders slumped. The arrogant fire in her eyes died, replaced by bitter, burning tears of utter defeat. She turned to Sarah, who was still sitting on the floor, clutching the blood-spotted handkerchief. Victoria choked on the word, her throat convulsed. "I am sorry." "Louder," Gabriel demanded. "I am sorry," Victoria sobbed, the tears finally spilling over, ruining her immaculate mascara. "I shouldn't have hit you." Gabriel stared at her for a long, heavy moment. "Take off the ring." Victoria's head snapped up. "What? No, Gabriel, please, I apologized. The arrangement is terminated," Gabriel said smoothly. "You have proven yourself to be a liability. I do not partner with liabilities. The ring Victoria. Now. With trembling, defeated hands, Victoria slid the massive 5-carat diamond off her finger. She placed it on the table. Without another word, she turned and fled the restaurant, her sobs echoing out the heavy mahogany doors disappearing into the New York night. The entire restaurant was still in shock, nobody daring to move a muscle. Gabriel turned back to Sarah. He extended his large, calloused hand toward her. Sarah hesitated, her heart hammering against her ribs, but slowly reached out. His grip was remarkably gentle as he pulled her to her feet. Manager Gabriel called out without looking away from Sarah. The floor manager practically materialized out of thin air, sweating profusely. Yes, Mr. Moretti. This young woman is going home for the evening. She will have a paid month off. Her hospital bills for that cut will be covered, and my associate by the door will leave a check to cover her wages and tips for the year. If she loses her job over this, I will buy this restaurant and fire you personally. Are we clear? Crystal clear, sir, the manager sputtered, nodding frantically. Gabriel looked down at Sarah. He noticed the cheap frayed fabric of her uniform, the exhaustion etched deep into the corners of her eyes, and the silver locket resting against her collarbone. It was the locket that made Gabriel's blood freeze in his veins. He hadn't noticed it when she was pouring the wine. He hadn't noticed it when she was on the floor, but now, standing inches from her, catching the dim, ambient lighting of the chandelier, the intricate, twisted silver engraving of a wolf howling over a crescent moon was impossible to miss. It was a custom piece. Only 5 of them had ever been made. They belonged to the inner circle of the Russo syndicate, the rival family that had murdered Gabriel's mother 20 years ago. Gabriel's eyes snapped from the locket to Sarah's face. She looked so innocent, so fragile, but in his world innocence was usually the most elaborate disguise. "What is your name?" Gabriel asked, his voice suddenly void of all warmth, stripped down to bare, calculating ice. Sarah, she whispered, terrified by the sudden shift in his demeanor. Sarah Collins. Gabriel stared at her, his mind racing through 1,000 different violent scenarios. Collins. A fake name, obviously, or a mother's maiden name. Well, Sarah Collins, Gabriel said, stepping back, adjusting his cuffs. I suggest you go home and put some ice on that. We will be seeing each other again very soon. He turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving the diamond ring on the table, the shattered glass on the floor, and a waitress who suddenly realized she had just been dragged into a war she knew absolutely nothing about. As Gabriel slid into the back of his armored Maybach waiting on the curb, he pulled out his encrypted phone. He dialed a number he rarely used. "Boss," a gruff voice answered on the other end. "I need a full background check on a waitress at Cipriani downtown. Name is Sarah Collins. But more importantly—" Gabriel paused, staring out the tinted window at the glowing skyline of the city. "I need you to find out why the supposedly dead daughter of Don Russo is pouring my drinks." The dossier dropped onto Gabriel's mahogany desk with a heavy, definitive thud. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, and Gabriel was in his private office at the top of the Woolworth building, the neo-Gothic skyscraper that served as the legitimate front for Moretti Enterprises. The city below was a sprawling grid of amber lights, but Gabriel's attention was entirely consumed by the thin manila folder sitting in front of him. His chief of intelligence, Dominic Gallagher, a former MI6 operative who had found private sector syndicate work far more lucrative, stood on the opposite side of the desk, his expression grim. "You were right, boss," Dominic said, pouring himself a 2-finger glass of Macallan 25 from the crystal decanter on the sideboard. "Sarah Collins doesn't exist. Not really, anyway. Her social security number was issued out of thin air 15 years ago. Her birth certificate is a high-grade forgery. Good enough to fool the New York State Department of Education, but not good enough to pass a biometric deep dive. Gabriel opened the folder. Inside were surveillance photos of Sarah, walking into her nursing classes at NYU, taking the subway, sitting beside a hospital bed in a sterile room. She looked exhausted in every single frame, carrying a weight that seemed entirely too heavy for her delicate frame. "And the mother?" Gabriel asked, his voice a low rasp in the quiet office. "Admitted to the Briarwood Care Center in Queens 3 years ago," Dominic replied, tapping a specific photo in the file. "Early onset Alzheimer's rapidly deteriorating. The clinic is expensive, $12,000 a month. Sarah works 50 hours a week between the restaurant and a campus library just to cover the copays after financial aid." Gabriel stared at the photograph of the frail woman in the hospital bed. Her hair was completely white, her face hollowed out by disease. But Gabriel didn't see an elderly patient. He saw the sharp, aristocratic cheekbones. He saw the distinctive tilt of her jaw. It was Maria Russo. 15 years ago, Anton Russo, the ruthless head of the Russo crime family, was brutally gunned down outside a social club in Little Italy. A week later, his wife Maria and their 7-year-old daughter Isabella were reportedly killed when their armored Cadillac SUV was forced off the George Washington Bridge into the freezing waters of the Hudson River. The bodies were never recovered, washed away by the currents. Or so the underworld believed. "It's them," Gabriel murmured, leaning back in his leather chair. The pieces clicked into place with terrifying precision. Maria faked their deaths. She knew her husband's brother Vincent orchestrated the hit on Anton to take over the family. If Vincent knew Maria and the true heir were alive, he would have hunted them to the ends of the earth. Dominic took a slow sip of his scotch. "Vincent Russo has been running the family unofficially for 15 years, but he can't access the offshore accounts. The old Don put the Cayman Trust over $2 billion in liquid assets in a bloodline lock. It only transfers to his direct heir upon their 25th birthday." Gabriel's eyes narrowed, the tactical map of the New York underworld rearranging itself in his mind. "When does Sarah turn 25? "Next October." Dominic set his glass down. "Boss, if Vincent finds out Isabella Russo is pouring champagne in Soho, he won't just kill her. He'll torture her to get the biometric keys to that trust, and then he'll erase her. The question is, what do you want to do with her? The Russos killed your mother, Gabriel. This is the perfect leverage. We hand the girl to Vincent, and we ask for half of the Brooklyn ports in exchange." Gabriel looked down at the photograph of the frightened girl on the restaurant floor, clutching his silk handkerchief to her bleeding cheek. He remembered the soft, terrified look in her brown eyes. He remembered the sickening crack of Victoria's diamond ring against her skin. A cold, unfamiliar protective instinct coiled tightly in Gabriel's chest. He had spent his entire life destroying his enemies, but trading an innocent girl to a butcher to settle a blood feud felt like a line he was suddenly unwilling to cross. "No," Gabriel said softly, closing the folder. "Vincent doesn't get her. Prepare my car, Dominic. I'm going to Queens." By 8 a.m., the Briarwood Care Center was humming with the quiet, sanitized routine of morning rounds. Gabriel walked through the linoleum-floored corridors, drawing nervous glances from the nursing staff. Even without his heavily armed security detail, whom he had ordered to wait in the parking lot, Gabriel moved with an intimidating, predatory grace that did not belong in a suburban medical facility. He found room 412. The door was slightly ajar. Gabriel pushed it open silently. Inside, the morning sun was filtering through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. Sarah was sitting in a plastic chair drawn up tightly to the bed, holding the frail hand of the sleeping woman. She was reading aloud from a worn paperback copy of Pride and Prejudice. She wore a simple grey NYU hoodie and faded jeans, her dark hair pulled up in a messy bun. A small white bandage covered the cut on her cheekbone. She looked so remarkably normal, so far removed from the blood and violence of the name she carried. Gabriel stepped fully into the room, the heavy soles of his shoes making a soft thud on the floor. Sarah gasped, dropping the book. She jumped up from the chair, her eyes widening in absolute panic as she recognized the towering man in the bespoke black suit filling the doorway. "Mr. Moretti," she breathed instinctively, stepping backward, putting her body between Gabriel and her sleeping mother. What are you doing here?" "If this is about the restaurant, the manager gave me the check. I swear I haven't talked to the press. I haven't told anyone. Breathe, Sarah." Gabriel interrupted, keeping his voice incredibly soft, raising both hands to show they were empty. "I am not here to hurt you, or your mother." Sarah's chest was heaving. "How did you find me? Why are you here?" Gabriel slowly closed the door behind him, locking it with a sharp click that made Sarah flinch. He walked closer, his dark eyes fixed on her. "I'm here because of the necklace you were wearing the other night. The silver locket." Sarah instinctively reached for her collar, her fingers brushing the silver metal hidden beneath her hoodie. "My locket. It belonged to my father. He gave it to me before he died in a car accident." "Your father?" Gabriel said, his tone perfectly level, was not a traveling salesman named Anthony Collins. His name was Anton Russo, and the man who killed him is currently looking for you. Sarah stared at him, her face completely blank with shock. "Russo? What are you talking about? You have the wrong person. My mum changed our last name from Rossi to Collins, to hide from my dad's gambling debts. That's all." Gabriel looked past her, glancing at the sleeping woman in the bed. Maria's mind was gone, safely locked away from the horrors of her past, leaving this young woman completely defenseless. "Your mother lied to you, Sarah," Gabriel said gently, taking another step forward until he was only feet away from her. "She lied to keep you alive. The symbol on your locket, the wolf and the moon, is the crest of the Russo crime syndicate. Your uncle Vincent Russo murdered your father. He tried to murder you and your mother on the George Washington Bridge. You are not Sarah Collins. You are Isabella Russo, the sole heir to a $2 billion empire." Sarah shook her head rapidly, a nervous, breathless laugh escaping her lips. No, you're crazy. You're a mafia boss. You see enemies everywhere. I'm a nursing student. I eat ramen noodles 4 nights a week. I am not a mafia princess. "I don't make mistakes," Gabriel said quietly. Suddenly, Gabriel's encrypted phone vibrated violently in his pocket. He pulled it out, glancing at the screen. It was Dominic. He answered it, bringing it to his ear, without taking his eyes off Sarah. "Speak." "Boss, we have a massive problem." Dominic's voice was strained over the line. "Arthur Harrington just left to sit down at the Union League Club in Midtown. He wasn't meeting with his bankers to fix the mess you left him in." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "Who was he meeting with?" "Vincent Russo," Dominic said grimly. "Harrington is desperate. Victoria is humiliated, and their estate is being seized today. Harrington traded information for Vincent's financial backing. He told Vincent about the waitress you defended at Cipriani. Vincent's men ran the restaurant's security footage through facial recognition." Gabriel's blood ran ice cold. "Did they get a match?" "They matched the locket, boss. Vincent knows. We just intercepted chatter on the police scanners. 4 armed men just walked into the Briarwood Care Center lobby disguised as medical transport." Gabriel hung up the phone. The air in the room instantly changed thick with the electric tension of impending violence. He looked at Sarah, the gentle facade, gone replaced by the lethal enforcer that had conquered New York. "Get your coat," Gabriel ordered, reaching into his tailored jacket and drawing a suppressed 9mm Heckler & Koch USP. "Now." "What are you doing?" Sarah shrieked, staring in absolute horror at the matte black firearm in Gabriel's hand. "Are you going to shoot me? If I wanted to shoot you, I wouldn't have driven to Queens to do it," Gabriel snapped, grabbing her arm and pulling her away from the bed. "Your uncle's men are in the building. They are coming to kill you. We are leaving. Right now." "I can't leave my mother," Sarah screamed, digging her heels into the floor, struggling against his iron grip. "They don't want your mother. She's practically a ghost." Gabriel hauled her toward the door. "They want the bloodline heir. If you stay here, they will slaughter everyone in this ward to get to you." A heavy, muffled thud echoed from the hallway outside, followed by the distinct sound of a body hitting the floor. Gabriel shoved Sarah behind him, shielding her completely with his broad frame. He leveled the gun at the door. The handle turned. Gabriel didn't hesitate. He fired twice through the heavy wood of the door. The suppressed shots were quiet, just sharp metallic clicks. But the impact was devastating. The wood splintered outward, and a man in a paramedic uniform crashed through the door, falling dead onto the linoleum, a suppressed submachine gun clattering out of his hands. Sarah clamped her hands over her mouth to stifle a scream, tears instantly blurring her vision. The reality of Gabriel's words crashed into her with the force of a freight train. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a war. "Keep your eyes on the floor and stay behind me," Gabriel commanded, stepping over the body without a second glance. Gabriel moved with terrifying efficiency. They slipped out of the room and into the corridor. The nursing station was empty, the staff having fled or taken cover at the sight of armed men. 2 more fake paramedics were sprinting down the hall towards them. Gabriel raised his weapon, his face completely devoid of emotion, and fired with deadly surgical precision. The 2 men collapsed instantly. He grabbed Sarah's hand, his fingers hot and rough against her icy skin, and pulled her toward the emergency stairwell. They descended 4 flights of stairs in agonizing seconds, bursting out of the fire exit into the freezing morning air of the back alley. A sleek, armored black SUV suddenly slid into the alley, the tires screeching against the pavement. The back door flung open, and Dominic Gallagher leaned out, holding an assault rifle. "Get in," Dominic yelled. Gabriel shoved Sarah into the back seat, diving in right behind her, as the SUV accelerated violently, tearing out of the alley and onto the busy streets of Queens. Sarah pressed herself against the leather door panel, trembling violently. She looked at her hands. There was a faint smear of blood on her sleeve from brushing past the man in the doorway. She was hyperventilating, the world spinning in nauseating circles. "Look at me!" Gabriel's deep voice cut through her panic. She squeezed her eyes shut. "I want to go home. Please, I just want to go home." "You don't have a home anymore, Isabella," Gabriel said softly. "My name is Sarah," she sobbed, finally looking at him. Gabriel reached out, pulling a clean handkerchief from a compartment in the door, and gently wiped the blood from her sleeve. "Your apartment in Astoria is already compromised. If you go there, you die. If you go to the police, Vincent's moles in the NYPD will hand you over before midnight. Your old life died 10 minutes ago in that hallway." "Why are you helping me?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "You're the head of the Moretti family. The Russos are your enemies. I am your enemy." Gabriel looked at her, his dark eyes reflecting the passing city lights. 20 years ago, Anton Russo ordered a hit on my father. They missed him and killed my mother instead. I was 12 years old, standing right next to her when she fell. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I hated the Russo name my entire life. Gabriel continued, his voice tight with restrained emotion. I built my entire empire to crush your father's legacy, but watching Arthur Harrington sell out an innocent girl just to settle a petty grudge over a spilled glass of champagne. I realized something. He leaned closer, the scent of gunpowder and cedar enveloping her. I don't kill the innocent. I am a monster, Sarah, make no mistake about it. But I am not Vincent. You are under my protection now. Anyone who wants to put a bullet in you is going to have to go through me. The SUV navigated through the heavy Manhattan traffic, eventually pulling into an underground, high-security parking garage at 15 Central Park West, one of the most exclusive and fortified residential buildings in the world. Gabriel led her up a private elevator that opened directly into a sprawling, multi-million-dollar penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panoramic view of Central Park, but the apartment felt like a luxurious fortress. "Dominic," Gabriel said, shedding his suit jacket and tossing his weapon onto a marble console table. "Double the perimeter security. Get Dr. Harrison up here to check her vitals, she's in shock, and find out exactly where Vincent Russo is operating from today." "On it." Dominic nodded, disappearing down the hallway. Sarah stood frozen in the middle of the massive living room. The opulence was overwhelming, but she felt entirely hollow. She wrapped her arms around herself, shaking uncontrollably. Gabriel walked over to a wet bar, poured a small measure of amber liquid into a crystal glass, and walked back to her. He pressed the cold glass into her trembling hands. "Drink. It will help with the shock." She took a small sip. The liquid burned down her throat, grounding her slightly. She looked up at Gabriel. Without the suit jacket with his tie loosened and the adrenaline of the gunfight fading, he looked less like an untouchable king and more like a weary soldier. "My mother," Sarah whispered. "What will happen to her?" "I already have a team moving her to a secure, private medical facility upstate." Gabriel assured her, his voice softening. "She will have the best doctors in the country. Vincent will never find her." A tear slipped down Sarah's cheek. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be the person you say I am." Gabriel reached out his large hand, gently cupping her jaw, his thumb brushing away the tear just inches from the bandage he had provided the night before. His touch was shockingly tender, sending an involuntary shiver down her spine that had absolutely nothing to do with fear. "You don't have to be anyone but Sarah," Gabriel murmured, his dark eyes locking onto hers with intense, burning sincerity. "I will handle the rest, I promise you." For the first time in her life, looking into the eyes of a Mafia boss, Sarah actually felt safe. But outside the glass walls of the penthouse, the city was arming for war. Arthur Harrington's betrayal had lit a match, and the flames were about to engulf them all. Arthur Harrington truly believed he was playing high-stakes chess. In reality, he was playing Russian roulette with a fully loaded cylinder. At 9 a.m. on Wednesday, exactly 48 hours after Victoria slapped Sarah Collins at Cipriani, the Harrington dynasty collapsed. It did not happen with a hail of bullets, but with the ruthless, synchronized precision of Gabriel Moretti's legal and financial strike teams. Arthur was sitting in the sunroom of his sprawling 20-acre estate in Southampton, sipping imported Ceylon tea, when a convoy of 6 black Escalades breached the main gates. Before Arthur could even dial his private security firm, Gabriel's lead attorney, Richard Sterling, strode into the sunroom, flanked by 2 armed federal marshals on Gabriel's payroll. "Good morning, Arthur," Richard said smoothly, dropping a stack of heavily notarized legal documents onto the glass patio table. As per the terms of your bailout agreement, Gabriel Moretti is calling in your $80 million debt. Since you cannot produce the liquid capital, we are executing the asset seizure clause. Arthur's face drained of color. You can't do this. I have an arrangement with Vincent Russo. Vincent Russo is currently a little too busy fighting for his life to answer your calls, Richard replied with a cold, predatory smile. By noon today, your hedge fund will be liquidated. Your Cayman accounts have already been frozen. And this estate now belongs to Moretti Enterprises. Upstairs, Victoria Harrington was abruptly awoken by a team of movers boxing up her designer wardrobe. She ran downstairs in her silk pajamas, screaming hysterically at the marshals demanding they leave her property. But the reality was absolute. The untouchable socialite who had humiliated a waitress just days prior was being unceremoniously evicted, left with nothing but the clothes on her back and a permanently destroyed reputation in Manhattan's elite circles. Gabriel had not just broken the engagement, he had financially erased her family from existence. Meanwhile, across the East River, the streets of Brooklyn were turning into a war zone. Vincent Russo had taken Arthur Harrington's information and mobilized his entire syndicate to hunt down his niece. But Gabriel had anticipated the maneuver. Armed with the intelligence Dominic Gallagher had gathered, Gabriel did not wait for Vincent to strike the penthouse. He brought the war directly to the Russos. Gabriel's elite enforcers systematically dismantled Vincent's operations. They firebombed his illegal casinos in Red Hook, hijacked his shipping containers at the Newark ports, and severed his supply lines in the Diamond District. Gabriel was not just protecting Sarah, he was tearing out the infrastructure of the Russo family root and branch. Back at the Central Park penthouse, Sarah spent the days pacing the glass floors. The sheer scale of Gabriel's power terrified her. Yet, strangely, his presence was the only thing keeping her anchored. Every evening Gabriel would return smelling of exhaust cold rain and sometimes gunpowder, but his demeanor around her was always carefully controlled. He never raised his voice. He made sure she ate. He sat with her on the velvet sofa, explaining the intricacies of the underworld she had unknowingly inherited. "Why go to these lengths for me?" Sarah asked one evening, watching the city lights reflect in Gabriel's dark eyes. "You could have just used me as leverage. I'm the Russo heir. I'm your rival." Gabriel paused, pouring 2 glasses of scotch. He handed her one, his fingers brushing hers. "I told you, Isabella. My war was never with you. It was with the men who stole our families from us. Vincent took your father. He took my mother. For 20 years I thought absolute ruthlessness was the only way to survive." He looked down at his hands, hands that had orchestrated the downfall of empires. "But seeing you in that restaurant bleeding, terrified, yet refusing to lose your dignity, while Victoria screamed at you, it reminded me of something I thought I lost a long time ago. Humanity." Sarah looked at the silver locket resting against her collarbone. "I don't want the Russo Empire, Gabriel. I just want my mother to be safe. I want to be a nurse." "And you will be," Gabriel promised, his voice a low, reassuring rumble. "But first we have to cut the head off the snake. Tomorrow you turn 25. Tomorrow the bloodline lock on the Russo Trust dissolves. And Vincent knows it." The climax of the Underworld War did not happen in a dark alley. It took place in the sterile, hyper-secure underground vault of the Helvetica Swiss Bank in Lower Manhattan. The terms of the Cayman Trust dictated that upon her 25th birthday, Isabella Russo had to present herself in person, submit to a biometric retinal scan, and officially sign the transfer documents to unlock the $2 billion. Vincent Russo knew this. It was his only play left. His empire was crumbling under Gabriel's relentless assaults, his loyalists were fleeing, and his cash was burning. If he could intercept Sarah at the bank, force her to unlock the trust and transfer the funds to his accounts, he could buy an army big enough to wipe Gabriel off the map. At precisely 10 a.m., a heavily armored motorcade pulled up to the rear entrance of the bank. Gabriel stepped out his custom Brioni suit, concealing the Kevlar vest underneath. He reached back and helped Sarah out of the vehicle. She was dressed sharply, in a black tailored coat, her hair pulled back, the silver Rousseau locket resting prominently on her chest. She was pale, but her chin was held high. She was no longer just the terrified waitress. She was a woman claiming her birthright to end a war. They descended into the subterranean vault, flanked by Dominic and 4 of Gabriel's deadliest operators. But Vincent Rousseau had one final desperate card to play. As Gabriel and Sarah stepped into the main vault chamber, the heavy steel doors behind them suddenly shrieked open. Bank security guards fell to the floor bleeding out as Vincent Rousseau and a dozen heavily armed mercenaries stormed the room. Vincent was a hulking, brutally scarred man with cold, dead eyes. He leveled a submachine gun directly at Sarah's chest. "Well, well," Vincent sneered, his voice echoing off the titanium safety deposit boxes. "My beautiful niece. You look just like your mother before she went crazy. Step away from the girl, Gabriel, or I paint this vault with her brains." Gabriel did not flinch. He slowly stepped in front of Sarah, shielding her completely. "You are out of moves, Vincent. The building is surrounded by my men. The NYPD tactical teams you paid off have been neutralized. If you pull that trigger, you will not live long enough to see the shell casing hit the floor." "I don't care if I die," Vincent roared, spit flying from his lips. "That money belongs to me. I built this family while your father grew weak. Unlock the trust, Isabella, now." Sarah stepped out from behind Gabriel. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, but she looked her uncle directly in the eye. "No," Sarah said, her voice echoing clear and steady in the vault. Vincent blinked, stunned by her defiance. "What did you say to me, you little brat?" "I said no," Sarah repeated, stepping up to the biometric scanner. "You killed my father. You ruined my mother's mind with fear. You don't get the money, Vincent. You get nothing." She placed her eye up to the scanner. The machine beeped, flashing green. "Identity confirmed, Isabella Rousseau. Trust unlocked. Transfer the entire balance." Sarah commanded the terrified Swiss banker, cowering behind the desk. "Route it entirely to the charitable foundation registered under Maria Rousseau's name. Every single penny." "No!" Vincent screamed, raising his weapon to fire, but Gabriel was faster. In a blur of motion, Gabriel drew his weapon and fired. 3 suppressed shots echoed in rapid succession. Vincent's gun went wild bullets, sparking against the steel ceiling, before he collapsed backward onto the marble floor, dead, before he even realized he had been hit. In the ensuing chaos, Dominic and Gabriel's men instantly neutralized the remaining mercenaries. The firefight lasted less than 10 seconds, but the silence that followed felt like an eternity. Gabriel lowered his weapon. He turned to Sarah. She was shaking, staring at the body of the man who had haunted her family for 2 decades. Gabriel closed the distance between them and pulled her into his chest. He wrapped his arms tightly around her, pressing his face into her hair. "It's over," Gabriel whispered fiercely, his own heart pounding against hers. "He's gone, Isabella. You're safe." Sarah clung to him, the tears she had held back for weeks finally breaking free. She buried her face in the lapel of his suit, gripping the fabric, as if he were the only solid thing left in the world. 6 months later, Cipriani downtown was as bustling as ever. Gabriel Moretti sat at table 4 in the VIP alcove, looking just as intimidating as he had the night Victoria threw her tantrum. But this time, the atmosphere was entirely different. There was no fear, only quiet respect. Across from him sat Sarah. She was no longer wearing a frayed uniform, but a stunning emerald green evening gown. She looked radiant, rested, and profoundly happy. The $2 billion Russo Trust had been permanently funneled into a foundation that built medical facilities for the underprivileged across New York, including a state-of-the-art wing dedicated entirely to Alzheimer's research, where Maria was receiving world-class care. Gabriel reached across the table, taking her hand in his. He traced the faint, barely visible silver scar on her cheekbone, the only remaining physical reminder of the slap that changed their lives forever. "You look beautiful," Gabriel said, a rare, genuine smile softening his dangerous features. Sarah smiled back, her fingers lacing through his. She had given away a Mafia empire only to conquer the heart of the most powerful man in the city. Money could buy silence. It could buy power. But as Gabriel looked at the woman sitting across from him, he knew exactly what true wealth looked like, and he would burn the world down 1,000 times over to keep her safe. Conclusion. Gabriel's decision that night proved that true power isn't about destroying the helpless. It's about protecting what actually matters. By defending a terrified waitress, he dismantled 2 corrupt empires, ended a 20-year blood feud, and found the love of his life in the ashes. The elite thought they were untouchable, but they learned the hard way that arrogance always comes with a lethal price tag. If you loved this story of vengeance, justice, and mafia romance, hit that like button, share this video with someone who loves a dramatic plot twist, and don't forget to subscribe for more gripping real-life inspired stories.